as Rikeesha Phelon, our moderator. So our group was kind of inspired by Amanda Gorman's presentation at the inauguration when she was talking about finding their light. And we wanted to find the light in our community. So we invited these women of color to discuss their communication careers and talk about the hill that they have climbed to get where they are today. So we have Rikeesha Phelon, SIU Executive Director of Marketing, Communications, and Engagement. Then we have, I'm going to go left to right here on my screen. So Nalo Mitchell is with Springfield School District 186. Paris Ervin is with the Illinois Treasurer's Office. And Moyo Adeolu is that right? Oh, so sorry.
It's okay.
Is our UIS Public Affairs Reporting Intern and WCIA Statehouse Reporter. So thank you, each of you, for joining us today. And Rikeesha, I will let you take it from here.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for spending your lunch with us, and thank you to AWC Local for providing this forum and thinking about ways to have this really important conversation. Our conversation is going to be a mix of just kind of general communications path and expertise, but also just kind of talking about our unique experience as African-American women, Black women specifically. I want to use that term very intentionally, Black, because African-American can be limiting in the way that we talk about that. But Black women who are in communications. And so we are going to start with some introductions. Sarah's already introduced our names and titles, but I want to ask some of these ladies about how they got their start in communications. But before I do that, I do want to also mark that, you know, the presentation or the poem that was recited by Amanda Gorman was so captivating for a number of reasons. Her youth, her energy, the fact that she kind of took us all to task in a really graceful way. The fact that she walked out there in that stunning yellow jacket, and I'm still just looking for like the right pop of yellow to add to my wardrobe this spring, just because something about that colors are messages too, was so hopeful. But one of the things that was exciting for me to watch and to talk to my daughter about is the impact of words and the impact of communicators. I was in a conversation yesterday with someone, and they were talking about how people who know how to use words appropriately can rule the world. And that day, even though it was Joe Biden's inauguration, she took the mic and she ruled the world. And I think that's something that's inspiring for communicators. I think it's inspiring for little girls, whether they're Black or white, or anyone. I think it's inspiring for everyone to know that when you can kind of tap into the zeitgeist of what people are hearing, seeing, feeling, and find the right messages to communicate and connect with those audiences, you can really sort of rule the world. So that's the secret sauce of all these communicators and myself. So part of her, throughout, I'm going to mention just a few lines of her poetry, but part of it was, we the successors of a country and time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for a president. Now, I don't think any of us have that job quite yet, or we've not been given that platform or that mic quite yet, but we all have been in positions, all four of us, when it's been our job to communicate, whether it be through news media, whether it be to parents and educators internally, whether it's statewide, whether it's in politics, or it's maybe behind a pulpit in church. We've all had those experiences. So I want to hear about yours. So I'm actually just going to look at my screen here, and I'm going to start with Nalo. Nalo, tell us, what was your path into communications and where are you going?
So my path in communications, I started, actually my background is broadcast journalism from Arizona State University. And I never thought that I would have the opportunity to, from the pathway that I had taken and starting my family when I was a junior in college and getting married at a young age, but you know, everything circles back around and our destiny is already planned for us. So when I started at Springfield Public School District 186, I started in family and community engagement and was approached one day by the former superintendent and asked if I wanted to go into the communications department. That was 2010. And I said, well, I asked the question, will I still get my spring break and my Christmas break and so forth? And I had to think about it because it would be a life change. My children were young, and I came back and I said, well, if the big boss is asking me this question, the answer ought to be yes. So the answer was yes. And in 2010, I started in communications and became a coordinator years later, and it has been a joy and a true blessing. Thank you.
Me? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you. So I will start my journey with tennis because that is always very surprising to people that I played tennis in college. So I did get a bachelor's degree in communications. I started at Southwestern Illinois College in Belleville, Illinois. And I played tennis there for 2 years on a scholarship. And that's how I got recruited to come to Springfield. And I've been in Springfield ever since. I started playing tennis for UIS. So I am a Prairie Star, very proud of that. And that was really life-changing for me. So started on the path of communications, I would say then, because educating. And then eventually started working for Channel 20 in Springfield, and I worked my way up. I will talk a little bit about that later, but I worked as a reporter for a few years, fill-in anchor. I did that, and then eventually transitioned into state government. And so I've been an agency spokesperson for several agencies, and now the chief of communications for State Treasurer Ferrick. So tennis brought me to Springfield. I've always been a communicator. And so I think, I've always expected I'd be in this field, but definitely didn't expect the stop in TV and now in state government, but I am certainly grateful. Thank you.
And I guess I'll go. I'm so nervous. So I've always been a natural communicator. I don't know if that's because maybe I was the third child, so there wasn't much attention on me. So I've always had something to say. I received my bachelor's degree in communications from UIS, and then I returned home. I wanted to do broadcast journalism, but being from Chicago, it's obviously a very competitive market. So when doors didn't open for me, I basically created my own digital show where I would interview local entrepreneurs to also not just practice my own storytelling skills, but to provide a different story for the city of Chicago, because oftentimes we only hear the negative stories. So I really wanted to shed a light on our local entrepreneurs. And then I was so fortunate enough to get an opportunity with the Senate Democrats, and I served as a videographer and on-air correspondent. And now I am back at UIS getting my master's degree in public affairs reporting, hopefully to go back into that journalism field. And then I think you asked, where are we going? Where do we hope to go? And I'm currently in the running for Miss Illinois USA. So I hope to serve our state as a title holder and use those communication skills to show that I can communicate with people, whether they're from the city of Chicago or Central Illinois.
All right, you've got to rule the world. I just know it. So I'm going to go on to some other questions here. I would like to know, what do you feel like, what experiences have best prepared you to grow in your field? Were they mentors? Were they experiences? Was it what you were learning in the classroom? Was it outside? How did you get here? What were the experiences that really prepared you to succeed?
I can jump in and start. I would say Channel 20 was such a blessing for me in so many ways. I actually ended up working for Channel 20 after going to a job fair, and I met this guy named Jim Waldeck, and he says, you should really apply for this job. It was for a floor director. I'm like, I don't know what that is. I want to be a reporter. I'm trying to be on TV. That doesn't sound like it's on TV. And Jim says, no, you really should apply. I think you would be perfect. And he really encouraged me. So my story, I think, is a little different maybe because I've just had so much support. But I ended up going to the interview, and I got the call before I got home, and I started working as a floor director, which really is doing all the behind the scenes work. So running the teleprompter, I was ripping scripts, which they don't do that anymore. See, I'm getting old. And I was, I ran the cameras, I did a little audio. So I was definitely learning the ropes from the ground up before I became an on-air personality. And that really, I think, set me apart from a lot of reporters, because some of them just jump right in. So I was really grateful to get that experience working in all those different roles, because I think once I did become an on-air reporter, it just made me a better reporter. I also did some fill-in anchoring a little bit. It made me a more respectful, humble fill-in anchor as well. I mentioned the agencies that I've worked at, Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources, and IDOT. And that agency government experience gave me a lot of time to learn the other side of interviewing. So I was a reporter doing the interviews, conducting the interviews, saying, oh, it's so easy, you'll be fine. To the one actually getting interviewed, it feels a lot different. And so now I feel like I can better prepare my principal or the folks who I'm working with, any client, because I've seen both sides of the spectrum. So I'm really grateful for those experiences, and really grateful for all the good people who have helped me along the way and encouraged me to get to where I am today.
So as I think back and reflect on what has helped to prepare me for communications with Springfield Public School District 186, I go back to my high school years in Chicago, Illinois, where I was actually on air. We had an on-air broadcast news show that was actually on TV at the time. You talk about old, Paris, you're definitely young, on TV, which was the cable back then. And from there at Arizona State University, when I participated in Association of Bahana Journalists, and that was with the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism that, that actually included all people of color, Asians, Hispanic, African-American, Blacks, and that prepared me for this. And then when I fast forward many years later, and having transitioned from the Phoenix, Arizona area back home to Chicago, as my counterpart mentioned earlier, she's from there as well. And wish you the best of luck in your running for that beautiful, beautiful crown. We wish you the best. But when I moved back to Chicago and then transitioned to Springfield, and I must say that my roots in Springfield, Illinois, go back to 1890. My great grandfather was born here in 1890, and I actually had the blessed opportunity to meet him. I actually saw his obituary. I have it. So that history is rich. So moving back to the roots of where my grandmother, who is still alive and will be 91 years young tomorrow, when she moved back here and she said, I'm going to move back to my homestead. And I was like, yeah. I decided to move here and started as a classroom assistant over at Washington Middle School, Go Warriors. Was hired by Kim Donahoe on the spot. Before that, I was with Chicago Public Schools as a teacher's aide. So I had the opportunity to work with students, work with families from all ethnicities, from all socioeconomic backgrounds, and then came here, did kind of the same work, and then had the opportunity to work as an assistant in communications, and then eventually transition as one of the coordinators over the district. But it has also been mentors, mentors when I look back at, my mother, I look back at my grandmother, my aunts and friends, and, even pastors along the way, because we all need encouragement. And, I'm grateful for the nuggets and the tidbits that have been given to me along the way to help strengthen me to get to the point of where I am. Because when we think of the hill that we climb, the hill that we're climbing is not always easy, and it's not always pretty.
That's true.
I
Moyo?
I was gonna say, I absolutely agree with what you said, mentors. And that is actually something that I've always like prayed about. I haven't found like one mentor who I feel that can really pour into me, unfortunately, but that's always something I'm always interested in hoping to have one day. But what has really helped me was when I studied abroad in 2015 to Brussels, Belgium. It was the opportunity that really changed the trajectory of my life. I was the only Black person in the entire group, and only one of two Americans. So I was connecting and communicating with people who did not speak English, and having darker skin, being in Belgium, and it was just an opportunity that allowed me to not only go to school for a semester, but to just interact and build my network with international people. And some of those people are still great friends, and some of those people are just a helpful network for my communication career. So that really helped me as a communicator. And I think it really made me feel confident, because I'm like, if this little American girl can, cover stories in Belgium, then I'm pretty sure I can cover stories back in my own hometown. So it definitely made me feel more confident in my skills.
I want to quote a little bit more Amanda Gorman. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made and the promise to glade the hill we climb. Nalo just mentioned that phrase, the hill we climb, and I want to know about some of the challenges that you have faced as Black women specifically in your career. And it might be something big and it might be something small, but it all feels big. My name is Rikeesha, so I knew I needed to get in front of people so that they could meet me, understand me, get to know me and my skill, and not be judged or make a judgment just based on how my name was pronounced. I'm sure that you probably run into that too, Moyo, right? I also am aware of the fact that there are certain phrases that get used with Black women to describe them, particularly in terms of communication, but not just Black women, but also Black men, that are common tropes. And I just want to get your honest reaction to some of these, and also tell me what your experience has been in terms of how you were introducing yourself as a professional in workplaces that may not quite be ready for all the glory you bring. But here's some common phrases to describe, could be to describe you. She's articulate. She's aggressive. She's loud. You can't tell she's Black when she talks.
So
Oh
I heard that quite a bit on my journey in school, especially on TV, and as a communicator now. I mean, my initial reaction is it's offensive, and it's really unfortunate that people have these preconceived notions about us, just the color of our skin. There's this assumption that, maybe we're uneducated, or we maybe we don't have come from a solid family foundation, or there's a list of things. I could go down that path. One thing that I have made a note to mention just for years is that I am originally from East St. Louis. I spent, I was in East St. Louis until 4th grade. Both of my grandmothers still have homes there, one's deceased, but that has always been embedded in me, even though I went on to Collinsville, which is where I did the most of my schooling. But I always tell people that I am a proud product of East St. Louis, because I think people, like Moyo said, it actually makes me a little emotional, because
okay.
People think negatively of that community. It's a predominantly Black community, impoverished. And, there are a lot of amazing, good, educated people that come from East St. Louis. and come from Chicago and these other type of communities. And so I find myself often telling people that, like, that is a part of my story that I want people to know.
You want them to know the whole Paris.
Listen,
that includes
all of
the
me.
community that you come from, that you represent. I've heard you say a number of times, I'm East St. Louis.
Listen, all day. Yes, thank you.
I actually really love that about you.
I agree with Paris. It makes me, Rikeesha, when you were saying those words and those phrases, it made me a little like filled with anger and then also emotional. Like I wanted to cry a little because I've experienced that. I've experienced someone who's not the same race as me say, oh, I had an attitude. And I'm like, me? An attitude? And that word, it triggered me because it's like, I didn't have an attitude in this very moment. And I think you're using that word because of the color of my skin, actually. I think that's why you're using that word. And I truly feel like I know myself, and I don't think that I ever usually portray an attitude.
Or if you do have an attitude, people are allowed to have them.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
I'm not going to tell you I never have one, because sometimes I do.
That's true. But I think in the workplace, it's usually toned down, if anything. So it caught me off guard, and it really hurt my feelings. And it's something that I pay attention to when I have conversations with people. One thing that I feel a challenge is sometimes I wonder, am I the diversity hire? Or are they hiring me for my skill set? Are they hiring me because, oh, she's talented and we could actually pour into her and she can pour into our company as well? That's what I want to be hired for. That's what I want to be brought in the room for. So that's something that always crosses my mind, even if I have the job. It's something like, oh, am I here just simply to help them, to help their stats? So that's just something that always crosses my mind. Even if I feel confident in the work that I'm doing, I want to make sure that I'm there for the right reasons.
Okay, so Rikeesha, when you made those few phrases, I wrote them down. She's aggressive. I didn't write all of them down, but she's aggressive, she's loud, she's articulate. And so when we think about the glory that we bring, I'm bringing the glory in. So if I'm bringing the glory in, surely, yes, I'm articulate, I'm educated. I have a right to sometimes be loud because everyone is loud sometimes. And I also have the right to be, I don't consider myself aggressive, but I have the right to be assertive. Because in order to bring the glory, you have to be assertive. You have to be assured and sure of who you are and whose you are. And so in that, in me bringing the glory, I'm articulate. I am well abled, just as everyone else who is here today, to be in the room, to speak with a voice of a calm voice, because oftentimes when we are upset, we are angry, sometimes, yes, I may get a little bit aggressive, not my norm. I'm always going to be assertive, but I'm always also going to come from a lens of kindness and assume positive intent on the other end, on the other side. And in that, yes, this glory carrier is articulate, assertive, and sometimes I might be loud, but usually when I'm loud, it's because I'm laughing very loud. I'm a loud laugher, but I'm not going to do that today.
Oh man, y'all hear Nalo preaching at you? I just want to applaud all of you just for being really honest about that and that assessment. You know, I think one of the challenges that we have as Black women, particularly Black women communicators that have honed those skills, and make no mistake about it, you guys have honed those skills. I've honed those skills, is that it becomes very marketable for certain reasons, right? You're the people that people want to hand the mic to for a very specific reason, because of all that glory you bring, because of the presence that you bring, the experience, the voice, the tone, all of that comes with this Black girl magic, right? And so one of the things that we often have to think about is all of that is people want to use that as their mic, as their microphone, as their platform, as their bullhorn, and we're really good at that. The question we often have to ask ourselves as Black women is our voice just as valuable if it's not in service of a product or an organization, but it's at the boardroom, it's behind the scenes, it's talking to the boss, it's influencing change in the organization? I am curious about your experiences, not just in being a mouthpiece for organizations, but have you struggled to find ways to have your voice understood and heard behind the scenes internally within your organizations? Have you had good and bad experiences with that?
Go ahead, Paris.
Okay, so I think I've had good and bad experiences. For sure, I am not one to hold my tongue, but in some of these environments, you sometimes have to. So I think that I have been around people who have allowed me the space, but what do they say, mansplained? I get that. Talking over me, I've gotten that. And so, yeah, I think that, I've experienced all of that, and also have had to conform and dial back in a lot of ways as well.
So I too have experienced, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And sometimes we have to have those challenging conversations and still allow our voice to be heard as we communicate in a way that is effective for everyone to really listen to us. I don't want to just be heard. I want you to listen to me. And as I've gotten older, there's a different approach. 10 years ago, I would have approached it differently. 20 years ago, I would have approached it differently. But having those hard conversations, and, one thing I have to say about Superintendent Gill is, we are having some of those conversations because we know that by educating the children, they are tomorrow's future. They're the future, they're our future. And so those conversations are not always easy. They haven't always been easy. They're not always pretty, but in the end, at least we can have the difficult conversations now to change the trajectory for tomorrow. And then that way we have a positive impact, not just between the two people that are having the conversation, but also for our schools, for our staff, for the community, and for our future. It's an honor to be here, and I really appreciate being with these dynamic women today, because thank you so much.
Yeah, you might be the youngest on our
panel,
so
I don't
I'm curious about your experiences so far.
Exactly, I don't have much experience yet, but at least one example that I can give is when I was working with the Senate, when we were going through over the summer, when we were going through there was a lot of racial tension and protest, and we had to message for the senators. What I really appreciated is we had daily, I believe there were daily meetings amongst the communication team. And we talked about not just how we were going to message for the senators, but what we thought was going on. And we really got to, maybe it was for an hour, 30 minutes to an hour, we really got to, almost vent and just debrief, because every day it was a new thing happening, unfortunately. So we really got to kind of speak our mind and also explain what we would like to see and what needs to be heard. So I really did appreciate that platform. And I think more companies need to do that, not only just when issues are happening, public issues are happening, but all the time. Because if they're happening all the time, when issues happen, then we won't need to quickly group. We will already know how to handle those issues and how to message on them.
Rikeesha, can I jump in for just 1 second here? I remember when we were in transition with the school district, and there were the small meetings, but then there were the secret meetings before the small meeting. And so there were gatekeepers that were keeping information that I wasn't aware of, but the person that was leading the district at the time did not know that I was not a part of didn't understand why I wasn't a part of the secret conversations. And so there was kind of gatekeeping. And I had to assert myself and say, well, this is why I didn't know ABC, XYZ. And then it was at that point that the interim superintendent said, well, you need to attend the cabinet meetings. I was intimidated. I did not want to do that because I had already been through part of the transition, but so we're on the third transition at this point. And it was a mentor who said to me, you need to make sure that you're in the room. And I had to buckle up, sit down, put on my big girl panties, so to speak, and be in the room. And I had to be assertive. And I knew I was going to get some crazy looks, and I did. But guess what? I made it through. So I just wanted to share that because that was difficult. It was difficult. It was difficult that there were things that were being kept, with regards to some of the things that were going on. This was before Superintendent Gill was here. And, sometimes we have to just go ahead and knock down those barriers and continue to work through them. Why? Because it wasn't about Nalo. It was about the schools, the kids, the community. And how can I communicate best if I don't know what's going on?
I think that's a big one, the being in the room where it happens. I mean, I have to be in the room. And
Yes.
again, it is not about Paris just wanting to get in the business. I mean, I like that too, but
Right.
it is really important that I have a seat at the table. And that's something that I have always pushed for and will continue to push for. And I will call you out on it too. I wasn't in that meeting. I need to be in that meeting. And it's really important. And I think as a professional communicator, it's just better for all of us at the end of the day. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think
such a good point for the same reason that Paris just said. And Paris and I have talked about this over the years. We've worked with each other for quite a while off and on, but we have to remember that a lot of times when we're dealing with issues of race, sex and gender, a lot of these in terms of our professional lives is how we are trying to navigate power structures, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest ways for people to assert power kind of in an old guard way is to be protective and selective about who has access to information. And that is and whether you're Black or white, all the women on this call who are communicators know this, right? Yes. You can't do your job well if you don't have access to information and you don't have access to the principles. And that is just something that we've all had to learn how to, whether we did it politely, whether we did it on the sly or we barged into a room, we have had to fight for access so that we can do our jobs well. And I'm sure that all women can relate to that. I want to go to one more question before we go to questions from our participants. There was a general question posed about kind of the general Black experience and how that has influenced our work. I want to get a little bit more specific. It's been a really difficult year. It's been a really difficult 400+ years, but specifically, it's been difficult in the last year for a couple of reasons. As a lot of our friends who are not accustomed to paying attention to the Black experience in terms of policing or an education or any of the ways that we're addressing systemic racism have woken up to that. And as organizations wake up to that, I don't know about you, but sometimes there feels like there's a little bit of an increased burden on the women of color that are already in those workplaces. So I want to know how you have handled and processed the last year for yourself personally. What are you seeing on Facebook and how you're responding to friends and that role, but also in your organizations. I want to know what the last year has looked like for you. And I know that sounds like a really big question for a final question. So you don't have to tell me every detail, but it's worth pointing out, particularly for Black communicators, it's been a very taxing year. And there's been a lot of extra unpaid work, by the way, that's been assigned to us in this. So what has that been like? And Moyo, you actually already got this started a little bit, talking about your experience with the Senate and trying to message around some issues last summer. But yeah, how did you process the last year?
Well, first and foremost, I'm really big on like mental health and taking care of yourself. I think that is vital if you want to even do your job well. So I prioritize that. with everything going on, I made sure I was mentally okay so I could be present at my job or at my internship where I'm at now. And I take that very seriously. But for me, I really, when I was with the Senate, I did my mental health stuff, but then I also processed everything that was going on and made sure that it was addressed in our meetings and made sure that my voice was heard and making sure that we're getting the stories across so correctly. So if that meant going to Senator Kimberly Lightbird's Juneteenth event and getting the story so it could be public, then that's what that meant for me. I did what I needed to do to make sure that those stories were told, because I think and especially from a Black lens, because sometimes even in the newsroom, stories can be told, and I've witnessed this, and they are biased because the storyteller. So I think it's important that we also prioritize diverse storytellers as well. So just doing my part,
Right.
and making sure that I am also mentally ready to do my job and do it well so that the general public will have a better understanding of what is taking place.
So good.
So I think for me and for all of us, for a number of reasons, the last year has been heavy. I mean, and on top of the pandemic, I mean, we're all drained. I was joking earlier that I feel like I have aged years in the last year. And so as it relates to your question, yeah, you were dealing with it on a personal side, and then you were kind of dealing with all this heaviness on the professional side. And I would say, yeah, it was a lot, but in a lot of ways I was encouraged, I think, because my office, really wanted to message and really wanted to connect and touch base and just talking through some of that. But you're right, it is kind of the work on top of the work when you're already feeling tugged and such a burden. I've been encouraged to see different organizations and television shows, and we're seeing the Black Lives Matter, but we're seeing all these other things that are basically talking about Black people and the Black experience, I guess, if you will. But that part is encouraging, to see everyone talking about it and speaking up and speaking out. I love that. But doesn't that also highlight where we were? Like, wow. I mean, we had such a lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion across the board. I mean, when I turn on Netflix and I see the section that says Black stories, I mean, where was that all along? So, I mean, I think that we are moving in the right direction. I do think that, yeah, it can be a lot when you're dealing with it on the personal side and the professional side, but I am encouraged and trying to embrace what is happening here. So I'll stop there and let Alo go.
Okay, thank you, Paris. This past year has had its own set of challenges, personally as well as professionally. And, as a Black woman in the room, as well as others who, sit on cabinet with the superintendent, we had to have some of these hard conversations. But I have to say that a lot of times our personal and professional intersect. And at least for me, it has. I found myself thinking, so I have to figure out what's the best place, on which side of town do I feel most comfortable for my Black son to live. If if my family and I decide to relocate, where would I feel comfortable to make sure that he is safe? And so these are things that when you think about the professional side, well, this is wonderful. I have this wonderful opportunity, but what is the community like and how will they embrace us as a Black family. I have to think about that, especially with my Black son. I have to go back to one of the quotes from The Hill We Climb at. This is one of my favorite. What just isn't always justice. And so I have to remember that daily. And even though it just is this way, or it has always been this way, maybe because of the race riots of 1908, which brought about the NAACP, which I didn't learn until many years later, and then realizing that my family has been here since the 1890s, what just isn't justice. So what are we doing to make sure that there's justice for us, to make sure that there's justice for the future of us, not just us as Black women, us as Black women, us as our family members who, I have family members that are not Black in my family. All of the women that are here today, what are we doing to make sure that what just is right now, that it isn't justice, but we need to make sure that we bring about justice and have these conversations. And that's why it's necessary that during this last year, what did I do? I began to exercise a little more. Kind of fallen off that, but I became an intermittent faster. I made sure that I was calling my family more. I send scriptures more often than I had. I'm sorry.
I was gonna let you keep talking, ma'am.
Yeah.
You know, when Paris, when Moyo spoke, I thought about just this past weekend, I was with my dad. And he said, man, this is something he's in Phoenix, Arizona. He said, this is something you would never see. We're watching the NCAA basketball game. And I said, what? He said, 4 Black commentators. He said, back in the day, you would never see this. And so I'm thankful that we're trying to forge ahead in the hill that we climb, and we're trying to make a difference because we know that what's happening now, it can be so much greater, not just greater for Blacks, not just greater for women, greater for everyone, greater for our nation, our world. I know that we want a better place for our future, and I'm just excited because this past year has helped me to reflect and say, what can I do to be a healthier individual? I too, Moyo, yes, I believe in counseling, regular counseling, as well as counseling with clergy. I believe in taking my vitamins. I believe in taking a moment, just sitting in silence, not necessarily reading, not doing anything, just meditating, just being in silence, being still. Being still is what I've learned to do, if nothing else, this past year.
That's it for me too. The silence has been a salvation for me.
Yes.
We had one question that came in, and so I want to end with this, but the heart of the question was, how have you, and we don't all have to answer this, but have there been situations where you have had to learn how to stay true to yourself, who you are, but at the same time, change your approach so that you can have more influence in the organizations that you serve? And I think we all can say yes to that. And I actually think if you are a good communicator, you are actually trained at doing that, understanding where the message is or where you're starting and figuring out how does it have to be delivered in a way that actually provides understanding, enlightenment, and engagement for our audiences. So I think I can answer the question for all of you and say that we actually feel like we're masters at that, not just because we're Black women and we have to do this shape-shifting thing to make people happy sometimes, but also because we're communicators. And I think I can say this for all of you, and myself included, we're pretty good at our jobs, right? So, well, that's why they invited us here, so I think we can just
Thank you. I'll take that.
All right, I just want to end on this unless there are other questions. The ending of her poem, you guys probably could say with me, but I think it's worth noting: when day comes to step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid, the new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. With that, I want to thank all of our panelists and everybody that joined us today. We are so grateful that you gave us this platform and this mic, and we hope that you have a fantastic day. And AWC, again, is having a membership drive. So if you are not a member, they've got some really great opportunities for you to join right now with some discounts. But thank you to everyone that joined us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rikeesha, for finishing the meeting for me.
I didn't know you were coming back. I didn't want to steal your thunder.
That's okay. Steal away, steal away.
Oh, I hand it back over to Sarah Kincaid, who, by the way, you guys don't know this, is actually next door to me right now. So I'm going to hand it back to her.
Yes, so thank you. Also, I wanted to say thank you to you, Rikeesha, for your time as well. That's what I wanted to end with. So we will make this available on the AWC website. So if you want to share it with your friends later, or maybe you have some folks in your organization who need to hear this message and hear what this conversation is like, feel free to share that with your coworkers or even just friends and family. So thanks guys for joining us. We appreciate your time, your honesty, your candor. It's been great to talk to you today. So thank you guys.
Thank you.